Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome to the show. My show is about celebrating artists and their body of worth. And I am very excited about our guest tonight, Tamara Jenkins. According to her Wikipedia page, it says that she is a filmmaker, and I object to this next line, and a sometime actress. Because I believe that once you're an actress, you're always an actress. And yes, and I am so thrilled that you're here this evening. The Savages, one of my favorite films for a lot of reasons.
I have to stop you right there. You have the wrong Tamara Jenkins on the IMDb.
I cannot.
There is two of us.
Oh my God.
I know. So one has Tamara Jenkins as the SAG name, and I have Tamara Jenkins as the equity name. So that's probably one.
Well, this is going to be quite an interesting interview tonight, and I apologize starting out. No, please forgive me for that. I didn't think it was possible to have two actresses with the same name.
I know, and it's happened quite a few times, Richard. I've actually been offered to direct people's films, and I've had to politely turn them down and say, you might want to go to the other Tamara Jenkins. And we both have a friend, Scott Elliott, at the New Group, and we both pronounce our names the same way. So it's, in fact, one year, my tax attorney cut out an article from the newspaper and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were doing this." And it was a picture of her. And he said, "I thought you looked a little funny."
Well, I hope that you're going to forgive me to start out, but I am going to get a chance to know you tonight.
Yeah.
So, at least what's happening is that we are going to set the record straight across the board tonight. And that's the way I'm going to rip this up, because all of my notes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You were so looking forward to talking about this.
No, I am looking forward to celebrating you.
Oh,
and before we even jump into all of this mishigas that I've created here, I'd like to ask, how are you doing really in the midst of this crazy world we find ourselves in?
Well, funny you should ask. I'm actually doing great. It's been crazy, as you know, for everybody. But right before we shut down, a couple months before we shut down, I actually had emergency open heart surgery.
Wow.
Yes, I had a valve in my heart that failed. And so I had to have emergency open heart surgery. So I was in recovery when all this happened. And so it was actually a good excuse for me, because I'm one to want to push myself. And so I just have laid back and recovered. And now I'm starting to itch to perform again and to get back in that world. But it's actually been nice for me to, not have any pressure during this time in terms of, seeing things going on and wanting to go out for them, or jobs coming up, that kind of thing. So it's worked in my benefit. But I sure do miss everybody, and I miss going to the theater, like we all do. And I'm anxiously waiting to get back.
Well, we all are. Well, let me ask you this. Where are you recuperating these days?
I'm now north of Chicago. We moved here about 3 years ago, after being in New York, of course, for decades. But my parents were getting on in years, and I had a 12-year-old daughter. At that time, she was 9. And we had, we were running a theater company in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
my husband Jay Montgomery and I, and we still have a beautiful historic landmark home built in 1863 in St. George, Staten Island, half a block from the ferry, right around the corner from the ferry terminal. And we had 2 house fires in a span of 5 years. One spread from one neighbor and one spread from the other neighbor. So we were out of our house 6 months the first time, and the second time we were out of our house a year. So we were ready to just get out of Dodge and take some time off and take care of family business and whatnot. So that's what we've done. And we were, my husband actually was performing here in the Chicago area in Michigan. And I was more focusing on the family issue and our daughter and my mother, who passed in 2019. So, yes, but it's going to be very interesting, I have to say, after so many years in New York, to put my foot in the water here in Chicago, which is a fantastic theater community. Mm-hmm. But I'm an unknown, which is a very strange place to be after all these years, So we shall see what happens.
Now, you and I have a mutual friend, Ann Kittredge, who is watching tonight. And we were talking, and she did tell me about the fires, which I can't even imagine going through. I have to tell you, it is truly one of my biggest fears. I live in an old house, and it is something that I can't imagine going through, not once, but twice. How does one get through this? And just, I don't know how old your daughter was when this was happening, but to have to start all over again.
It was rough, especially because we were, we had founded this theater company, and we were basically raising the Titanic, to have a professional equity theater company with, major productions and whatnot. And my daughter was 2.5 the first time, and she was about 8 the second time. So, twice in her young life, I picked her up out of bed and ran out of a burning house. And so there was some trauma involved there, which is one of the reasons why we came here. She was not really able to relax in the house when we went back after the second fire. So we thought, you know what, now's the time to go. We need to be near family, and she needed to be near family and whatnot. So that played into it. But, the children lose everything when there's a fire. They take everything, any toy, any piece of clothing, anything that was theirs that's not wood, they take. So she used to say after the first fire, we had such wonderful neighbors that came together to support us. Luckily, we were very involved in the community. It's a very active arts community and a very socially active community, St. George, Staten Island, right by the ferry. And so neighbors took us in for a couple of weeks until we had permanent housing for the 6 months we were out. And I remember she said just a couple of days later, she said, it's bad when you have a fire, but the good thing is you get all new toys. So that's kind of how she was, she was trying to reframe it in her own little mind. Such an incredible trooper. And, when she was a little bit older, she understood a little better. So, and it triggered some of the trauma from the first time. So it was a little more challenging that time, but she's an incredible young person. She was raised in the theater at Harbor Lights, and, just a beautiful, creative, free spirit. And she's done incredibly well. I'm so proud of her. And I have to give her a shout out because she's been full online school now since last March because Mommy was extremely high risk. I've had both my vaccines, so now I'm doing good. But so hopefully she can go back to school. But she's done really, really well, and she's thriving. She hates it, but you know, she's still getting her good grades and going to class. I'm just really proud of her because this is incredibly difficult for the kids.
I can't even imagine.
I don't know how she does it. I don't even know how she finds all of her classes and all of her homework and where. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. But she's always been very self-sufficient, and I think that's really helped her during this time.
Now, getting back to you for a moment, are you originally from New York? Are you a New Yorker, or?
No, I'm from Chicago. I'm from the North Shore area, which is where we came back to meet my family. And I went out to New York in the 80s, in the middle 80s. And but I spent a lot of time on the road, and especially the 80s and 90s. I spent a lot of time on the road. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to your childhood. When you were growing up, did you grow up in a household that was exposed to the arts? Where did your desire to want to pursue this as a career come from?
Well, my father got a master's in voice. He was a Methodist minister, but a glorious singer. And my mother was the organist, and she also was a beautiful piano player. So we had music from the minute I can remember. Our family was always singing in harmony, and, you know, they had us doing little shows and things like that. You know, the preacher's family bring out the guitar and, you know, have the kids all singing and stuff like that. So I really grew up totally immersed in the arts.
Now, did your love of performing come from seeing your father up on the pulpit?
You know, that's a good question. I think we were performing. You know, my dad, his church was incredibly progressive and artistic. So, and this was in the 70s, 60s, 70s. So, you know, we had a folk choir, and we had a dance group, and we had, you know, the children's choir and the adult choir. And I think I was singing with all of them from the beginning. And, you know, my mom taught voice, and she taught piano. She was also a school teacher. So it was just everywhere in my life. And it's funny, I know a lot of people remember making a decision about that's what I want to do. I don't remember ever making a decision. It was just something I always knew that I had to do.
Now, what kind of music beyond the church music did you hear around the house? Did you hear show music? Were there cast albums?
My parents brought us to the Broadway shows that were touring in Chicago. And so we heard show tunes. You know, my parents listened to contemporary music. So it was the Beatles and, you know, all the bands of that time were playing around our house. And then the radio was everywhere. So it was contemporary music. And then I started studying voice at, I think I was 12. I had already been performing, but
Was this with your mom or with someone else?
With someone else.
Okay.
And early on, I think I was maybe 11. I did Amahl and the Night Visitors. I played Amahl with the Lake Forest Symphony Orchestra and singers from the Lyric Opera here. And so there was a wonderful teacher, Cynthia Fremling. She and her husband Warren on the North Shore of the Chicago area. Fantastic teachers, absolutely fantastic. They also taught my friend Rebecca Baxter, who's had a great Broadway career. And they just mentored. They mentored their students. And so I started studying classically at like 12 or 13, something like that. And then I went to school at University of Illinois on a voice, as a voice major, voice vocal performance. But I got pretty antsy because I wanted to do musical theater. They did not have all those musical theater programs.
No, that's
and I was, so what I ended up doing was I petitioned to write my own program, and they let me. So I had to have a high grade point average, but I was able to get rid of some of my languages and second semester of fugue writing and all that kind of stuff, that I didn't think was going to be applicable. And then I included dance and theater classes. So I sort of have my own little private conservatory at the university.
For you. Now, when you were doing this, were you also doing theater outside of college?
Yes, I was performing in Champaign. They had some, community theaters, and I was performing. I was able to do a lot of plays and a lot of different period things, which was exciting. At the time in New York, I would say I graduated in '84, and I had already my first equity contract before I graduated.
And what was the show that you got your equity card with?
I went up to the Muni and auditioned before I graduated, and I was doing a show in Champaign, and they had to hold the curtain for me when I came back with my equity contract. And I was so excited that I'm not even out of college. I got my equity contract. And everybody in the cast went, "Oh no, you shouldn't have done that." Why? And they said, you have to pay your dues, And I was like, no, I don't think so. So my first job was touring. I was a piccolo lady, touring in the Music Man with Jim Dale and Pam Dauber.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And we did a tour of all the big musical houses. And it was fantastic. I had the time of my life.
So you love being on the road. You love touring.
I love touring. I'm an oddball in that way because I wanted to be out of New York. Mm-hmm. That's why I ended up moving to Staten Island. I just have I'm like very sensitive to energy. So Manhattan for me was a bit of an overload. So I really enjoyed traveling and being on the road. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Now, as I got older, I got married, then I didn't want to go on the road anymore. And that's when we started the theater company. So, yeah.
Now, before you got to Staten Island, I'm just curious, when you came to New York, did you know anyone here? Did you make this decision based on people that you were working with? What got you to New York?
Well, the first thing that happened was after The Music Man, there was an audition for the first national of Cats in Chicago, and I booked it. So I never worked in Chicago. I have never worked from a Chicago theater company, except the Apple Tree Theater Company in their very first production. I was in high school, and I played Susan the Silent. But I was based here with Cats for 18 months. The first national tour was here for 18 months.
In your own backyard. That's wonderful.
Yeah, amazing. And so I started here with Cats. And then after Cats, I auditioned and I was still based in Chicago. I flew in to audition for Cosette in Les Miserables, and I booked it. Mm-hmm. So I went back on the road, and one of the stops was like 9 months in Chicago. So I was able to, be around. I had a house here. I bought a house downtown in Chicago after Cats. So I was able to live in my own house in Chicago and do the show here. And then after Les Mis, I did another, is it right? Yeah. After Les Mis, I did another tour of a show called This Is America that toured all over the country. And that's when I moved to New York. So I was just working steadily. I didn't have my own place in New York, but I was auditioning in New York.
Did you live in Chicago proper, or did you live in one of the suburbs?
My house was in Chicago proper. I never should have sold it, but so yeah, it was in Chicago proper. It was in what's now Boys Town.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
So it wasn't that big a transition, or was it, for you to move from Chicago to New York?
totally different city. Chicago is much slower pace.
Mm-hmm.
There's more space, and it's just less intense. It's just less intense.
Now, you said that your parents, excuse me, but you said that your parents took you to the local touring companies. Had you or your family ever been to New York prior to your moving here?
No, no. I went once with a boyfriend for like 5 days, staying with his friends and stuff. So I had a bit of an idea, but no, I just, that's where you have to go. So that's where you went.
And did you live right in Manhattan when you came here, or did you go right to Staten Island?
I lived for 10 years. Well, maybe, let's see. I think I lived a couple of years on the East Side, and then 10 years at 71st between Broadway and West End. It was a fantastic location, a great brownstone apartment. But at a certain point, I looked at how much I was paying for rent every month and added it up over the 10-year period and said, ouch. So the smartest thing I ever did was I was doing Chicago on the road. The other thing about being on the road is that you make more money because you get, well, this was the days of the big, the real national tours. I mean, with Cats and Les Mis, we had trunks, we had, it was just divine. You were really living in a city. You would rent an apartment. Usually I would rent an apartment and rent furniture with those tours. Even rent a piano, have it in my house. You're there, I was 9 months or 8 months in San Francisco. It's just fantastic. So when I went out with Chicago, I decided I'm going to save my money and buy something. And that's when I bought a 2-family in Staten Island. And the income from the house enabled us to start the theater company, and is still enabling us now to be, without work. We still have to, bring in a little extra income, but it's been really a stabilizing force financially. So I recommend to all actors to buy income property. When you go on the road and save your money and buy income property. And it's our retirement, so.
Now, you mentioned earlier that when you got your equity card, that your friends were saying you have to pay your dues.
Yeah.
When you moved to New York, did you have any other survival jobs, or were you always able to make a living in this business?
When I first started out, I was booking everything, and I thought it was always going to be that way. And so the first 10 years or so, I was just working as an actress. And then the industry started to change, and I was a legit soprano. I was playing all these ingenue roles. The style of music changed. There really wasn't a lot for that voice type for a period of time. So I learned how to mix and, belty mix. And eventually, I went out with Chicago and whatnot. I've always been one of these people that was not satisfied just being an actress. I really love the animal of musical theater. I spent some time apprenticing with a producer by the name of Alan DeLynn to learn the commercial producing side. And I spent some time writing librettos and, studying the animal, basically. And then I think that was always in the back of my mind to produce as well. And starting the not-for-profit, that's a whole nother animal, the not-for-profit.
Well, I want to talk about that in a moment. But before we get there, you mentioned, the changes in the business. Since you've been in the business, what are some of the biggest changes that you've experienced, both positively and negatively? What you've been able to embrace and what you still resist?
Well, I think when I first started out, there were less people. And there was more of an open door policy before casting directors became really powerful. And I happened to be one of the people that was on the list of Johnson Liff and, those shows. But you could get in. It was much easier to get seen for things, I think. I do think it was if you're musical theater, you're musical theater and that's it. And that has softened a little bit over the years, which is good because musical theater actors are very versatile. They understand style and, the television work is good and the theater work is good, So, that's a really positive thing. I think that's opened up a bit. Because I was doing the theater company for 8 years, 10 years, I had a baby right before that. So it's about 10 years before I had been auditioning. So the last 8 years, I was casting people in shows. And what we were seeing a lot of, because our contract was small, all the major talent that we had were people that we called and said, come play. They wanted to work with a director or do a certain role or whatever. But now people have the training. They are trained. These programs are, these people have a lot of experience. When we were starting out, we didn't know anything. We just were, we were talented and we were excited and we were just throwing paws at the wall, and learning as you go. Now, I think people are a lot more prepared when they get into the business. We'll talk about that later when we talk about the, casting with the theater company. But so I think that's a little bit different. And now I used to be one of the youngest ones in the cast all the time. And then those days are gone.
Isn't it funny how that happens?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. I was doing a show in Atlantic City many years ago, and then I realized that the entire chorus were not even born when I moved to New York. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
So, getting back to Staten Island and your theater company, we're going to talk about that. But did the theater company come as a result of your moving to Staten Island, or did your move to Staten Island come about because of the theater company?
That's a good question. It came about because we were there, and the neighborhood was full of so many wonderful artists. And then there is a location in Staten Island called Snug Harbor Cultural Center and Botanical Gardens. And it was like our backyard. We went there all the time. And they had 2 theater spaces that were absolutely divine. One was an old chapel that was 148 seats and it turned into a small theater space, which functioned really well. And the other one was the second music hall built after Carnegie Hall. It was an old vaudeville house that was built for the mariners that were, this was Snug was the retirement home for the retired Snugs, the retired seamen, mariners. And they had, their library and their theater and their chapel and their hospital and their farm all there. So this theater was just laying fallow. Nobody was doing anything in it. There's some local theater companies, but we thought we know a lot of people that want to do a lot of different kinds of work, and it's a ferry ride away. The bus connects to the ferry and drops you off right in front of Snug Harbor. So we decided to, put some feelers out, and decided we wanted to start something, and we weren't sure where we were going to end up. We did this giant benefit for Stephen Schwartz as the very first thing that we did. And I actually wrote a libretto for it. And it was about the journey of Stephen's career, his career journey with the music interpolated, helping to tell the story. And Chet Walker directed and choreographed it, and Malcolm Getz starred as Stephen, and Terry Ralston played his agent, Shirley Bernstein, and Desmond Richardson came and did all the Fosse stuff, and Chet's company came. We had major principal dancers come. Nikki Ferret, do you know who Nikki Ferret is? She runs the it's now called American Dance Machine for
Yes.
So she was instrumental in bringing these amazing dancers over that just did incredible work. It was a brilliant.
How did all this come together? Was this all your brainchild, or but you obviously had the connections to make this happen?
Yeah, and we thought, if we're going to do something, we want to work at the level that we're used to working, but we don't have necessarily the idea was we're going to do that same quality work without spending $1 trillion on sets and costumes. We still had beautifully designed shows, but you're able to create magic with talent. So that's what we did. We just hired talent, and the magic ensued.
And
so in answer to your story, to your question, the need was there, and so it was those two things sort of came together: the desire to create something, make something happen, and the need.
I'm going to ask a very silly question. Was this an easy process getting off the ground, or were there a lot of bumps in the road?
Getting off the ground was fantastic. What happened was we did that concert, and then the CEO of Snug Harbor called us and said, "Would you like to be the resident theater company here at Snug Harbor? You have to produce 3 or 4 shows a year."
Now, what year was this that this was happening?
2010.
Okay.
You have to produce 3 or 4 shows a year, and you have to have an education program. So we were providing content for them and helping to bring people there and put Snug Harbor, okay, I don't want to overstretch, but our idea was that we would enhance the reputation of both Snug Harbor and Staten Island with the kind of talent that we were bringing.
Now, St. George Theater is already in operation at that point. Am I correct? Or did they? I know that they restored and they started building, bringing in huge acts.
Yes.
Eliza performed there. I saw her there. And
they were up and running. That was where we did our first show, was at the St. George.
Okay.
The only other thing we did at the St. George, and this was the beginning and the end of Harbor Lights, was the fact that we lost the venues at Snug Harbor. So we did produce, we produced Gypsy, starring Sally Mays, directed by Bill Castellino, choreographed by Lisa Gaida and Marianne Lamb. And that was at the St. George. And it was a fantastic production. But that house is backstage, is Union. So we had backstage and onstage union, and budget-wise, it just killed us. We couldn't go on producing there. What happened at the theaters at Snug Harbor was the small theater, where we would do a couple shows a year at the small venues. We were doing plays and smaller, interesting, like Marry Me a Little. We did Back to Bacharach and David. We did Amahl and the Night Visitors in the small space. And then we did some plays there. And then we would once a year do this big blowout, like a big musical theater production that would also include either children or some local actors. There's some real talent in Staten Island. So we would have, up to 10 equity contracts, major, and then we'd hire a lot of non-equity talent from Manhattan as well. And then we would incorporate in part of the community. So it was, a way to grow Harbor Lights and, embrace the community at the same time, once a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really what we could handle in terms of the infrastructure of the company that we had. Well, we lost the small theater after a flood, a pipe burst, and they just shut it down. So then that whole season was pushed into this giant theater. So we did Driving Miss Daisy in an 863 seat theater. Mm. And so we had to build an extension on the stage. We had to add sound. We had a lot of expense when you go into this bigger space. And so everything suddenly became huge, which was a burden. And then that theater was set to undergo a desperately needed renovation. So they started shutting down. That was in the forecast. Mm-hmm. That we were going to lose the big theater too. So we also had a hard time getting dates that we wanted. They were booking another local theater company in there, and so the relationship. There was a new CEO who didn't really understand the value of what we were bringing. She just wasn't, coming from that mindset. So eventually, we lost our home. Is basically what it is, which was really sad, because there's still people in Staten Island that are saying, we miss Harbor Lights.
Let me show a little promo of some of the work that you were doing there, and then we'll talk on the other side.
Okay.
Good stuff there. That's incredible. How did you find your audience? Was it mostly Staten Island, or did people travel, from the other boroughs to come and see your productions?
We ended up
your outreach.
Yeah, we ended up having some people come from both Manhattan and Brooklyn, and even some from New Jersey. But it was primarily a Staten Island-based audience. And between our second and third year, we tripled the size of our audience, or first and second year. We tripled the size of the audience, and it kept growing and growing and growing. So we had the audience. We had a little bit of a dance with what are people going to come out to see in Staten Island. And we got better at, you're never, it's never foolproof.
Mm-hmm.
But you start to get sort of a conversation going with your audience about what kinds of things they want to see, and sometimes what we were very actively doing was our seasons were focused on certain things like diversity, because it's a challenge on Staten Island. So we did West Side Story, and we brought kids in. And had a professional moderator, gang kids. And they watched West Side Story, and they, had a psychologist there moderating a talk back afterwards. We did, I'm trying to think what else was that season. We did Rent, and, a similar sort of situation. Also bringing in certain parts of the community. We brought in street artists who tagged the whole set, which was amazing. And, there was always something we were bringing in. When we did Driving Miss Daisy, we partnered with the local antique car association. So we had all the different cars and Driving Miss Daisy parked out in front of the theater on Mother's Day. And you could get taken with, your mom in the back seat driving Miss Daisy. We were always doing these kind of partnerships to, sink roots into the community. And, it was a really beautiful thing. When we did our production of The King and I, and that's like I think that's the last show that I did. Jay and I, my husband and I, performed in some shows in the early years, but eventually I became one of the founding members. Peter Polyakin was our managing director, and he left. So I became the executive artistic director. So I was writing grants, and I was doing the budgets, and I was doing all that stuff. So I wasn't able to perform at all anymore. But in 2012, we were about to open our production of The King and I, which was the biggest thing we had ever done. And Alan Morocco was directing, Christine Toy Johnson.
Your friends, yes.
Yes, Mel Magayev was the king, and I was playing Anna. And Hurricane Sandy hit. They closed. Snug Harbor is it's a city park, so they closed the park. We were in the middle of tech. Still, the sets were being built and put up and everything. Shut it all down. They were able to get us in there to continue, after a few days, but no one could get to Staten Island from Manhattan. Yet our king, Mel Magayev, was an amazing man. Rode his bike to the ferry, and then rode to the south shore, where he was helping, people rip the rotting drywall off their house, and then would ride his bike to rehearsal.
God bless him. Wow.
Incredible. But so that was shut down twice, The King and I, because then we had a nor'easter after that. I don't know if you remember that. But that production had, all these beautiful kids from the community, and teenagers from our education program, beautiful dancers that are now, Broadway dancers and company dancers. And the audience that came, and they poured in, which was amazing at that time. We weren't sure if anybody would show up, but they needed something, and people were just in tears and thanking us, because it was the first normal thing they had done since the storm. Was like, and the show is so beautiful. I mean, it's The King and I, so, and it was beautifully designed. There was a picture from the ballet. It was the original Robins that we did, and there were 4 cast members from our show that ended up in the Broadway show, including our Chula Longhorn, was the Chula Longhorn on Broadway, and some of the lead dancers. But that was a really memorable, service to the community, but at the same time, the community, being part of the production.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, were there any major obstacles that you ran into because of the close proximity to New York City and Broadway in terms of these productions?
One time we got the rights to do Private Lives, and then they called us back and said, "Oh, wait a minute, you're in New York City. You can't do Private Lives." They didn't know Staten Island was in New York City. So it was hard for us to get rights because we're in New York City. We're, sometimes producers have grand rights on hold. Sometimes, one of the big theater companies in New York is got it coming down the line. And there, the non-equity companies, the community theater companies could get the rights for things that I'd be like, we wanted to do that, we can't get the rights. Cabaret we wanted to do, we had a really interesting idea for Cabaret, but it was coming down the pike, it was going to come back, so we couldn't get the rights. So it was mostly a rights thing. The beautiful thing for us and our friends was that people would work, even though we only had a 5-show week, so our contract was pretty small, but we're paying pension and health.
Mm-hmm.
People need health weeks, and they're off most of the week, and you're free to do auditions, you're in town, so it worked out really well for us to come and work with us, and get to do things that they've always wanted to do, or plays, things like that. So that was very gratifying as well.
Now, I want to ask you, what from your background shaped the theater itself, and how did the theater shape you as far as an artist moving forward with your career?
Well, I can say, how this theater shaped me is really profound, isn't it? Being able to, first of all, work with the most gifted, generous human beings, and brilliant human beings. I mean, absolutely brilliant. It's been such an honor. And I've learned a lot as an artist and as a human being from watching other actors, mm-hmm. And directors, choreographers. And then I think, the challenges that we face as performers, you have to learn a lot about yourself to be a good actor, and you have to have a good understanding of how you tick, so I think, it's just been absolutely instrumental in forming who I am today. And the reverse, what was the reverse question?
What you brought to the table shaped the theater.
Well, I remember when I got Les Miserables, Richard J. Alexander said to me, they had somebody else in mind that Richard had been grooming, I think, for that part. Mm-hmm. But I called Johnson Liff. They knew me from Cats, and I said, I want to come audition. And they said, every soprano in New York wants this job. I don't think it's worth your time. And they called me 2 weeks later and said, okay, you can come in. So I went into the final callbacks. My audition was about 10, 12 minutes long. And I got the job. And he said, John Caird was, the one casting, and he said, you were different. And that's why I booked it. I mean, of course, I'm a great singer, and I looked the part, but there was, I'm different. And so I say, I spend most of my life playing these ingenues that are very underwritten. And, but I brought some gravity to those roles, maybe hopefully filling them out more than they might have been on paper. And is that the kind of answer you were looking for?
That's what I'm looking for. And I want to ask you, because you did tease me at the beginning before we went live, that you may be able to play something for us.
Yes.
Can you play something for us?
I can. I have, my husband and I, when the theater company was closing, we did a show, and we will be working on it and reviving it. And I'm writing the libretto for it's sort of a cabaret theater piece, but it's about our relationship, and very much like we did with the Stephen Schwartz, through music. So I have a couple of audio things from that. I thought I'd just play one little something.
Thank you.
Okay. And this is a Frank Wildhorn song, and it's just a clip. When I look at you, what I always see is the face of someone else who once belonged to me. I can hear him laugh, and even though that melody plays on, he's gone. When I look at you, he's standing there. I can almost breathe him in like summer in the air. Why do you smile his smile? But haven't I forgotten easy smile in you? If you could look at me once more, with all the love you held before, if you and I could only dance into the past and find that love we knew, I'd never take my eyes away from you. When I look at you. That's it.
Wow, I want more. I want more.
Oh,
wow.
You know what? It's so funny, Richard, that when you asked me if I had anything, we've had 2 house fires. And when we moved here, we had 2 floods. So I don't even know where, but we lost so much stuff. And I've been saying I need to put together, a website and a reel. And I apologize. I don't have it because we have reorganized our lives so many times, and it's just taken, everything. So I have to figure out where things are. We have boxes of things that are in
How
store.
long have you been back in Chicago now?
3 years. 3 years. But I had a mama who passed, and then a flood. No, a flood, and then my mom passed, and then a flood, and then open heart surgery. So
just a few things on your plate.
Well, a couple of things on my plate.
Wow. Well, now that you're back in Chicago, what are you looking forward to, career-wise?
Well, I've been really struggling with going back as an actress and not knowing anybody and going out there and just being a nobody. But I do want to perform. So I'm trying to figure that part out. If there are things that I can create for myself, I don't know. I did meet with an agent here who said, you know, women your age, there are a lot of stars in Chicago that are my age, and he didn't really feel might be an open door for me. Not
that door down.
Not that's going to stop me. And for a while when I first got here, I really wanted to artistic direct. So I'm open to anything. I also love teaching. I still have some students from my New York studio. Well, I did until last year. The last one finally went away to college. And I'm teaching a little bit online here. So I love that as well. So this year, that's going to be my quest, is to get myself out there and get back on the stage. I just really miss singing. And
well, anytime you get the urge, call me and sing. I'll listen. I mean, I've so enjoyed this tonight. Please forgive me for that major faux pas at the beginning of the evening this evening.
You know, I should have warned you. I didn't
you know, and it's like no one said anything. So you are welcome here anytime. I can't believe this, but we are at the end of our show. I do want to thank you. I hope it was a nice evening for you. Thank you. You're welcome here anytime. I also want to let everyone know, if you are around on Saturday night, I do this little thing called the Full Moon Positive Book Club. And on Saturday night, we have the Mountain Medium, James Anthony, and Muriel Palazzi, who does Reiki and all kinds of wonderful things in terms of healing. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list. Go to the 7th name that pops up and reach out with a phone call. Not a text message, not an email, not a private message. Pick up the phone. Call them. Let them know what's going on in your life. See what's going on in their lives. As my dear friend David Friedman always says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. You never know what someone else is going through. And Tamara, again, I thank you so much for being here tonight.
And honoring artists. It is so important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. But I want to give you the final word. Anything that you want to expound upon that we talked about tonight, that you want to build upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to anyone who's listening. And like I said before, you always have a platform here. And thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, you know, I find what you do so important that I kind of want to throw it back to you, because you know, to have someplace to go to talk about art right now it feels really good. And you know, I think as an artist, my goal in the future and always has been, like when we started the theater company, that we wanted to move and to inspire and to encourage human beings with everything that we do. And that's my mission. That's my mission for the rest of my life. And I take it very seriously. And I cannot wait to be able to go out and make a difference and help change the world through art again.
And we got to get all this behind us so we can get you on the stages here in New York. Thank you.
Yay! I have my house for me.
Thank you. Have a great night, and thank you.
Thank you so much.